Good evening to all of you. Thank you to the organizers of this Passion Talk for giving me this opportunity to meet some of you, or many of you, who have not met after Golden Jubilee, and meet Ajit today for the first time. That's great. As you mentioned, my three passions in life are strategy, entrepreneurship, and adventure. I'll just give you a taste of it before getting into the subject. I continue to pursue all these three concurrently. I'm continuously learning from experiences and books rather than from TV news reporters and newspapers. I travel a lot across cities around the world. I talk to people on the streets, which is why I need 1 week. And in the most unlikely places like Ushuaia, Buenos Aires, Reykjavik, Bangkok, Kassim, Denver, or small towns just outside Prague, and so on and so forth. So it's pretty fulfilling because I get to meet very interesting people. I also meet other interesting people who are like not on the street, but writers, painters, scientists, students, entrepreneurs. And because of the nature of my work, I get to meet big business people and the occasional ambassador or a minister of another country. I recently spent an hour and a quarter with an Afghan refugee at the Oslo Central Railway Station to understand from him the Norwegian culture as seen by a refugee. We can always read about Norwegian culture, but from the eyes of a refugee, it's a different world. So it was very interesting. He is a translator and a guide for refugees pouring into Oslo every day. So he's at the railway station, and then he gets hold of these refugees who can't speak a language other than their own. They come from Afghanistan, of course, from various Arab countries, Iran, and so on and so forth. They speak no other language except their own, and he has a bit of a skill in linguistics, and he knows Norwegian because he's been there for 15 years. So it's very interesting, and he told me so many interesting things. And then I told him that Dr. Abdullah Abdullah, the former Prime Minister of Afghanistan, had invited me in 2018 to a private dinner when he came to Mumbai to discuss how, in an informal way, how to increase the trade between India and Afghanistan. So when I talked about it, wow. And I also told him that, that Dr. Abdullah Abdullah is not, it's not a repetition. His name is actually Abdullah Abdullah. He's not a PhD, he's a dentist. So, wow, I didn't know that. I'll tell you many things you don't know because I see Afghans, refugees coming in every day. It was very, very fulfilling. So ordinary people like him give me a window to the world as much as people who are better placed in life. So all these people give me a kind of a context when I try to analyze situations. Even today's situation is some way influenced by understanding at the street level. Now, when I don't want to meet people, I do solo treks in strange places like forests, or go to desolate places, icy places like near the North Pole and the South Pole. Recently, I got caught in a storm in the Arctic Sea for 30 hours. Waves up to 23 feet were lashing relentlessly. It was real fun. It was like being on a roller coaster on steroids. Unadulterated fun and excitement, if you ask me. Fortunately, I don't get seasick. So I'd like to convey the fact that my life is a blast. It could have been the opposite because I got widowed in 2020.
Seminar, I'll call you.
And I could have chosen to become a recluse, but it's the opposite. I also write an annual paper in the last week of December about what to expect in the coming year. And the one about 2024 is about how two tides are going to come and clash. And there's no price for guessing that one tide is the economic tide and the other is the rising tide of AI, artificial intelligence. By the way, it talks about AI research reaching reasoning levels very soon. And surprisingly, on Wednesday, OpenAI's announcement was that ChatGPT 5.0 is going to be capable of reasoning. And it's likely to be called the reasoner. Just imagine from a language model which does summarization and a few interesting things like generating the next word, logically, it's going to start reasoning. So imagine where we're going to be into 2028. And that's what this paper is all about. In the midst of all this that's happening all here in these things and the economy around the world, where is the space for the Petro Dollar Agreement? Its demise is not a global event. For those who are in a hurry to get the answer upfront on the impact of its demise and get on to other tasks rather than listen to me, the answer upfront is that the dollar is not going to weaken on account of the demise of the pact. The dollar might strengthen or weaken for very many other reasons. So in that sense, this is not a defining moment in history. It's merely one of the many interconnected dots which define our present and the future, and that of USA. By the way, the term us, the last word in my title, is meant to be USA as well as us, meaning you and me and the rest of the world. By the way, I just want to say that there was no Petro Dollar Agreement in the first place. So what didn't exist can't die, right? But for those who still want to stay back and listen to this session, I'm going to do it in 3 parts. In the first part, I'll give you a somewhat comprehensive picture of what led to the situation, connected to other dots, and thus equip you to make your own analysis of what might happen. You don't have to believe what I say because these are all conjectures. 2, in part 2, I'll have you explain, participate and explain. And it's a nice small group of 12 or 13 or 15 people to strategically think, what should USA be doing? And then switch to what should Saudi Arabia be doing in the current situation. And third part is, if time permits, I'll ask that entrepreneur in you to think of what this opportunity is in this global turmoil. So these are 3 parts. So let me start with the first part. As I said up front, there was no petrodollar agreement in the first place, signed between Saudi Arabia and USA on June 8th, 1974, or on any other date. So it can't die 50 years later. That's just the gimmick of the press. It's like the case of COVID-19, when the world was trying to kill the coronavirus that caused it. Until date, nobody has found a solution. You know that according to the scientific definition of life, there are 7 parameters. The virus is not a living organism. It cannot reproduce on its own. And a few other things by virtue of which it's not living. But we know that it moves from once it gets to a cell, it splits into 2, along with the 2 cells, and has life of its own. So in some sense, we haven't understood what life is, and therefore, till we do that, we're not going to figure out how to deal with it. We'll just our immune system will get used to it, and we'll live with it. Likewise, there'll be a lot of things happening in the economy, in the world, which we'll get used to it and take it for granted and move on and do other things in the context of what happened. Okay, so what was there if there was no agreement? There was an arrangement of convenience between the 2 countries, whereby Saudis would sell oil only in US dollars. And USA will ensure that they'll have troops on the ground, spies and weapons on the ground to protect the House of Saud. The House of Saud is a royal family. Protect them from coups and also protect their oil pipelines in the kingdom from which they derive their wealth. You know, the line between the family and the state is very thin. So the oil wealth is the kingdoms and the kings and the families. So Saudi Arabia would buy weapons, and they did about a lot of it, buy planes, missiles, whatever it's from USA, and even from other nations with the consent of USA, for which USA did a deal with a bilateral deal with those countries. So, but USA was the policeman figuring out what Saudi Arabia could do or could not do. obviously, given that this is the nature of the pact or understanding, they could not create a document in which you could write all this. So it was a deal, let's say. It gave, yet without even a written agreement, it gave USA incredible advantage, and it leveraged it. It gave the Saudi ruling family also some degree of comfort, to ensure that.
Sorry, when can we talk? I mean, would you want it interactive during or after?
No, it will be in the second part and the third part. In the first part, I will just bore you with my own talk. Second part will be entirely interactive, and you guys will be doing most of the talking. So instead of a Q&A format, I said, let's have an interactive format where we are jointly discovering certain things. Okay. So this gave the royal family also some degree of comfort. It also ensured that no stage of the kingdom will be targeted by Israel. Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt were also targeted by Israel, but not Saudi Arabia. It's because of this informal agreement or understanding. Then what happened to the informal deal, which could have been extended by just exchanging kisses? You know how the Arabs meet, they kiss? Grown-up men kiss each other. Okay. But without any value judgment, I'll just point to three things. The first point is that the US security support came along with a fair degree of high-handedness by some CIA operatives, and they're in their dealings with various local people, even at high levels in society, as long as they were not the royals. They also recruited local Arabs as CIA operatives and as mercenaries to fight the US war in Afghanistan. There's been, and they use KSA, when I say KSA, I mean the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as a base for these things. They played games between Arab countries and within Arab countries. So I'm saying any other country in USA's place would have done the same thing. I'm not saying no, but there was a certain degree of arrogance that, look, we are superior, and then the rest of the Saudis are lower. Of course, the royal family is higher. So there was a tremendous resentment, and I've been going to Saudi Arabia at least about 25, 26 times in the last 19 years. And I've had time to meet people across levels, including tiny restaurants. So there was a time when some people even asked whether Saudi Arabia is ruled by the monarch, or is the monarch directed by the US on what to do and what not to do. So the arrival of Mohammed bin Salman, who I'll refer to here on as MBS, was seen as a breath of fresh air. He made several radical changes in the country to modernize it. He just brushed aside the CIA characters. Therefore, what you see in the press about MBS is quite different from what the locals think about him. Okay. Second point was USA was not seen to be able to stem the onslaught of the Houthis, who effectively attacked and damaged some Saudi positions in Yemen. The inadequate American response strained their ties with the royal family to some extent. They were no more the guys who can save completely. Okay. The third, the proverbial last straw on the camel's back, quite literally, was when President-elect Biden said something fatal to the Saudi-US relationship in the week between Christmas of 2020 and the New Year of 2021. It got drowned out with a week later, the 6th of January, when the trumpeters had that uprising. What Biden did was he announced to the world that the US will make the perpetrators of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi pay a stiff price. MBS obviously understood that he was the target. The Saudis alleged that Khashoggi was writing articles in English in a language and style which he's not capable of writing. So he was being spoon-fed articles to write in the Washington Post, in the Middle East Third Eye, etc. Now, whether it's true or not is a different point. These are the opinions and feelings of people around on the ground there. So it was, according to the Saudis, just he's being used as a puppet to sort of prick Saudis when Saudis went or offline or went off track. So it was just ideas to keep them on track. So Biden was supposed to take over in 10 days as the president of the USA, the commander of the most powerful military force in the world. But honestly, even a bumbling, intoxicated general would never announce such things in advance. They would quietly do what it took and then look askance and say, who done it? Who done it? They're not going to announce and then we're going to take action. The top trust of the White House did the utmost to control the damage, but it didn't really work. You won't believe MBS is one of the very few people in the world who led a country who did not call Biden when Biden took over as president. And even worse, he refused to take the call in January when Biden tried to call him. He said, I don't want to talk. So it was strained. So because of that, the world paid for Biden's lack of political finesse in international affairs back then. Today, he has finesse, but old age is getting to him. But back then, his exposure to international affairs and what to say and what not to were, let's say, subpar. Putin seized this opportunity to get pally with MBS. The result was that OPEC+1 agreed to cut oil production and sell the oil prices soaring. And you know, Russia's GDP, 60% comes from energy exports. So they actually became rich. And despite the Western sanctions, the ruble actually strengthened, contrary to the expectations. And the war with Ukraine, which was only a possibility in December 2020, actually happened because it is now much more affordable and sustainable. I think Putin didn't realize that it's going to last so long and it's not still ended. And his coffers are also getting empty fast. But he thought in a year or so, he'll wipe out, he's got enough money. So Saudi Arabia doesn't appear to be keen on kissing and making up because of the Jamal Khashoggi's incident. This may have given the impression, this has actually given the impression to the restive domestic constituency that they finally have a leader who can stand up to the world. And they're proud of that, actually. The royal family needed this badly because their continuance depends on how much they looked upon by the citizens of the kingdom. But this whole action, the Russians are also happy. They got the visa into Ukraine paid for them. And because of the European energy crisis and because of the US elections now in full sway, or the preparations, Russia has to do as much as possible before the winter. Because if the presidency changes on the 1st of January, there'll be a different thing happening. If Trump returns to power, there could be tectonic changes. He will try and put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Even if the settlement favors Russia, he wouldn't mind. And he would also not hesitate to threaten Zelensky that he'll pull the plug on military aid. And if Putin can get an honorable exit with some territory which is occupied as now part of his gains, he'll be very relieved. This is very important for Trump because he can then focus on China without Russia openly backing China. This will be part of the deal making. Now, this allows me to circle back to Saudi Arabia, which needs military hardware as well as modern technologies for renewable energy and artificial intelligence, which both USA and China will be glad to give in good measure in return for oil paid for in yuan. Now, Trump just does not want China to get close to Saudi Arabia and use its ability to provide pretty inexpensive technologies for renewable energy and quite fascinating technologies for AI, and then buy oil in yuan. That buying oil in yuan, I don't think anybody is bothered about because it's a very small fraction of the total global trade in oil. So what's going to happen? Trump is going to renew his friendship with Saudis very openly. And even during his own term as a president, he had a very smart, part Arab, part white person who was a great interlocutor between the two. And they'll all come into action. And you'll see USA and Saudi Arabia coming back to the table and working out things for themselves. But right now, Biden is trying to sign a military deal with the Saudis to make Saudis happy. But Saudis are grandstanding. They're saying, look, do something about to prevent this slaughter in Palestine. Otherwise, we can't sign it. Israel also knows that Biden wants this agreement with Saudi Arabia. So they're also grandstanding. So that's what's happening. Hopefully, it'll get signed before Biden's term gets over. He'll throw in more concessions if required. So he doesn't want Trump to be the champion who made it happen. So given this kind of jostling, which both Saudis and Israelis know, both need some kind of fig leaf to back down. Who knows whether it'll happen during Trump's time or in Biden's time. But all this will help MBS look more manly, and it's likely that whatever pact is there between is entered into between USA and Saudi Arabia, it'll be a little more favorable to Saudi Arabia than before. So let me conclude things that eventually things will settle down. The petrodollar pact will become irrelevant, the one which died. Something new will come into place. There will be jostling, strategic jostling in the meanwhile to take advantage in the run-up to that. So because neither country wants to be in different orbits, they want to be in the same orbit.